Merci beaucoup. Alors, j'ai choisi de faire mes transparents en français. Alors, je vous propose de vous parler en anglais, sauf si c'est mieux en français. So, I first would like to thank very much Professor Berthoz and Professor Hublin for the invitation here. I have put the two books, well, it's the same as a matter of fact. The book that I've just published, so everything that I will be speaking about running is inside, in French. So the title is not the exact translation, just because the US and France have different approaches to questions about Olympics, I would say. So I let you think about the optimal translation. Anyway, the issue that I want to address today is how to choose your velocity when you go running. So you fix a distance from 100 meter to marathon, and the question is, when do you speed up, when do you slow down? What is the best way to run to minimize your effort? And actually, I want to minimize the final time, but I want to minimize energy, of course, and effort. And this is what I want to explain to you. What is the difference between energy and effort? So energy allows you to produce a movement with a propulsive force, and also to be in a certain position. For instance, if I ask you to go and run a marathon with the left hand raised above your head, you may think it's really tiring and you don't want to do it. So there's both energy in the propulsive force that you're going to produce, but also in the position you choose to be. So, and the energy has two sources, one coming from oxygen, which allows you to run for a long time, and one coming from what is not oxygen, or as a matter of fact, anaerobic energy. And these two sources are very different in the sense that it's like two tanks. One is infinite size, that's oxygen, and the other has finite size, and you have to optimize the way you use it. But then what about effort? What do I mean by saying I want to model as well effort? As a matter of fact, if you go running, you have a brain. So a lot is due to what happens in your brain. And what really happens is not really clear, in the sense that your brain is going to give instructions to your muscles. So this is the first thing, is that it's not automatic, it's not immediate, it takes some time between the time you decide to do something and the time your muscle is going essentially to move. But this is also linked to the number of information you're going to give. So, for instance, if I ask you to sit down and stand up and sit down and stand up and etc. 10 times, you're going to tell me that's boring and that's tiring. And it's not tiring because I'm asking you to do something very difficult. It's just tiring because you don't see any point in doing it, and especially if I ask you to do it quickly. So there is something very important, which is motivation. And motivation, that is your mental desire to do the action, can be described into three different ways. If you're motivated to go running or to do exercise, you are able to produce an action which is more intense. That is, if you start running, you can go running more strongly. Or if you want to carry something, you're ready to carry something which is heavier if you're really motivated to carry it. The next thing is the velocity with which you react. A champion at the Olympics, he's supposed to start very quickly. And motivation is there. If you're not motivated, you're going to be much slower. Last point is, and probably the most important one, if you want to go running for a long time, is how hard it is and how hard you feel it is. And this is something we're able to put in our equations, because I've forgotten to say what I do in the end is mathematics, and I will put everything into equations. And we're able to, let's say, put a balance in between the benefit in running quickly and the cost of what is effort, that is, the kind of information you're going to use between your brain and your muscle. And there's something very important, is that if you go running for 400 meters, that is a lap, it has been measured that you can earn 1 second if you run behind someone instead of running alone, so which is a lot. And it's not because of wind, it's not because you're behind someone and you're protected like on a bike, it's because psychologically you don't have to think about what you're doing. And not thinking about what you're doing, not thinking about your pace, allows you to run a little bit more quickly because you don't spend so much effort. And it's not the same if you say, okay, I don't go running with my friend and I follow his pace, I go running with my connected watch. Because watching the connected watch and keeping your pace on the watch requires attention, which is therefore a little bit more tiring than just focusing just on the pace of the person in front of you. So our model in the end is like an economic computation of costs and benefits, putting everything into equation using physics, equation coming from the laws of physics. So the first one is mechanics, is Newton's second law of motion, allowing us to determine that the variation of velocity is related to the propulsive force. Of course, we don't know the propulsive force, so we haven't done much, and we're going to use the other laws to understand it better. So the next one is conservation of energy, that is in order to produce a propulsive force or a gesture, then I have to use my aerobic energy and my anaerobic energy. And the last equation is what I have tried to explain you up to now, is motor control. That is, I'm going to reduce the effort due to varying your pace or related to motivation. So in the end, we're able to compute and predict the velocity of a runner, the energy he has spent, and the propulsive force he has to put in order to produce the best performance. But of course, the issue is, how do I measure all the parameters that I'm going to need in my equations? Because if you go running, for instance, you know that you have a VO2, that is a rate of oxygen that you transform into energy, and there are many more parameters like running economy, a lot of things. So we don't measure anything. We just take position and velocity every 100 millisecond on European Championship in Munich. We got these data. They are very precise, and from these data, our code is able to compute all the physiological parameters that we need in the end. So what we can find is a lot of things that runners did before, but now we can understand what they do it like that. So the first thing is that on a 100 meter, athletes never cross the finish line accelerating. They cross the finish line slowing down. Actually, they slow down here. No, I don't. Here. They speed up until 60 meters. The time to do 10 meters is going down. At 60 meters, they're at their maximum velocity. And then from 60 meters to 100 meters, they slow down. Usain Bolt is the same, except that he speeds up until 70 meters. But any 100-meter runner crosses the finish line slowing down. And this is because this is the best way to run a sprint, is start as strongly as you can, and any human being cannot maintain his maximal propulsive force for 100 meters. So you decrease your propulsive force and you end up crossing the finish line a little bit slower than your maximum velocity. And computations show that if you decide to start a little bit slower in order to be accelerating all along, then you're going to produce a final time which is slightly bigger. So we're able to determine exactly, depending on the distance you want to run, how you should run it. So from 100 meters, 200, 400 is the same. You start speeding up very strongly, up to 70 meters for Olympic champions, and then you go slowing down. So on a 400, they spend almost all their race slowing down, as a matter of fact. Starting from 800 meters, the race goes with a final acceleration, and from 1500 up to the marathon, you start strongly, then you have a central part where you run more or less at constant velocity, and at the end being not clear and depending on the length of the race, you speed up. And we're able to understand the effect, of course, of the centrifugal force on a track, on an athletic track, and the psychological effect when you have someone in the next lane or you just run on the last lane, which is lane 8. So this is Femke Bol. So we worked on the way she's running. She's the world champion in 400 meter and 400, but okay, she's 400 meter a lot also. Yeah, sorry. And we compared her, so the blue is Femke Bol, the red is Matthew Hudson-Smith, who's the man champion. So you see that she starts much more, she doesn't start as strongly, but in the end, they end up more or less at the same velocity. Which means that she maintains her velocity much more than he does, because he starts with a much stronger propulsive force, and though they have more or less similar anaerobic energy, because he starts much more strongly, he's slowing down much more. So the point of our simulation was that we were able to vary all the parameters and understand when you vary parameters how you end up running. So the green one is if you put more force. If you have more force, then you start much more strongly. I've forgotten to say that it's going up and down because of the bends and the straights. So you start in the straight, you start in the bend and there's a straight, you speed up a little bit, then there's a bend again and the final straight. So if you put more force, you start more strongly, but you end up slowing down much more. If you have more anaerobic energy, then you manage to more or less keep your velocity more. So all this depends on the kind of physiological parameter you're training. Your coach tells you to train, and so that in the end the performance is not exactly the same. So we did also the 1500. Actually, we went until 10,000 meters, but I'm going to present you the 1500. The world champion at the moment is Jakob Ingebrigtsen. He is from Norway. Both his two brothers were 1500 meter champion. His father is an athletic coach. So he started running at a young age, and he started running long distance, which is, in some sense, unusual in countries like France, Britain, or Norway. That is, people who run very quickly, they usually go to do soccer, football, rather than long-distance running. So the way they are coached is they are really chosen to go to soccer rather than long distance. And he kept long distance and he kept training from very young. So he developed a VO2 that is an aerobic capacity, which is very different from others. And this is something we were able to compute. Maybe it's not quite clear, but there is here a green curve, which is a curve if ever your VO2, that is your rate at which the oxygen is transformed into energy, starts more quickly. So if it starts more quickly, then it allows you to run not so fast at the beginning. And this is the way he does. If ever you watch the 1500 at the Olympics, or 2 weeks ago in Rome, he always starts being last. For the first lap, he's the last. And he's the last because he has a VO2 which gets stronger, which gets strong much more quickly, so he doesn't need to start as strongly as the others. And we have more information about the kinetics, the decrease, etc. So the equation allows us really to understand the pace and the physiological origin of the pace. So, as I mentioned before, running behind someone allows you to save time because you see someone in front and it motivates you to run. So we could estimate what is the best lane to start. And as a matter of fact, the best lanes are 4, 5, 6. Then 3 or 7 are equivalent, 2 and 8 are equivalent. This is for 200 meters, and the lane 1 is very bad. So this is why now on modern tracks where you have 9 lanes, they do the competitions on line 2 to 9 instead of 1 to 8, because line 1 is really the worst. So what you have to do, what you have to know is that on a final, they draw the 4 best on line 3, 4, 5, 6, then the next 2 on line 7, 8, and the last 2 on line 2, 1. So there's really no hope to see a winner on line 1, because you put the worst runners on the worst lane. Something we did with my colleague Emmanuel Trella from Sorbonne University is to try and understand what would be the best athletic track, because the current athletic track is really due to football. Because as a matter of fact, there's more money in football than in athletics, so tracks were built using football places, and a football stadium is of width 73 meters. So if you divide it by 2, it makes 36.5, and it gives you the radius of the circle in an athletic track. And if you want to do 400 meters, it gives you the length of the straight line. So the straight line, which is 84.39 meters, has nothing to do with any athletic consideration. It's just coming from the fact that you want to put soccer inside to have a lot of events at the same place. And so what we managed to compute is that if you decrease the straight line to 60 meters, which means enlarging the radius, you have less centrifugal force, and this is what is written here. Instead of 84 meters, we put a straight of 60 meters, then you gain 0.1 second on a 200 meters, 7 seconds on a 10,000 meters, and you decrease a lot the differences between lanes. But this was not really, so also we did pictures of what could be a track with a rugby track inside, with a football stadium, etc. But of course, if you do that, if you decrease the length of the straight, then you decrease the lane here as well. And for javelin, it can get very bad, because javelin the length of the javelin is increasing instead of, and so it's not good at the moment to consider decreasing tracks. So this was, now we're working on how should be a 200 indoor track, because, or 200 short track, what they say. So as a conclusion, we have tried to bring a system of equation to compute the velocity, the energy, the force, but depending on what we call effort, that is, we want to optimize effort and resources in order to do the best time. And you use what is called optimal control, motor control, taking into account both the brain and the heart, and we're able to vary the physiological parameters in a quantitative way in order to understand what is doing what on performance. Thank you very much.
Merci.